it's Wayne again. We're here for the second half of this lesson. Ready, okay? I hope you enjoyed last week. I hope you did get that because I think that lesson was, or that half of the lesson was equally as important as this half, okay? So it probably won't take quite as long this half as I did the first half, but anyway, I want to go over principle 5 and step 6 again, okay? Because this is a new principle and a new step to you. I know we covered the others for like 2 months, and so I know that got drilled into your minds. So I'm going to read these again for you for this week. Okay, principle 5 was voluntarily submit to every change God wants in my life and humbly ask Him to remove my character defects. In other words, we're having problems removing our character defects ourselves. We're asking for God's help to show us and to remove them, not just to show us them to us, okay? Not to run from what He shows us, but to ask Him to show us, and then to ask Him to help us remove them, okay? Because sometimes we can't do that on our own. So Matthew 5:6 says, "Happy are those whose greatest desire is to do what God requires," and that's because God knows us. God knows us inside and out. He knows what's best for us. He knows us better than us, so to speak. You know, sure, there has to be balance, but we have to trust God, okay, on that. So we're happy because we do what His desire is. And what He desires for you might be a little different than what He desires for me, and we have to recognize that. One path might head this way, one path might head this way. Everybody was designed differently. We are all made up of separate segments of DNA. We look different, our personalities are different, our backgrounds are different, our educations are different, the people we hang around are different. And sometimes we have to hang around some different people to be able to improve our lives if they're keeping us in a spot where we don't need to be and we need to grow out of, okay? But God knows us. But that doesn't mean we're supposed to be all exactly the same. We're independent. He gave us free will. You know, there are certain qualities, that are going to be very similar because we all are a body of Christ, okay? But we're all different. Paul talked about this in the New Testament. One of us might be a hand, one of us might be an arm, one of us might be a head, one of us might be a leg. We're all different. We all have different strengths, and we all definitely have different weaknesses, okay? And then sometimes those strengths and weaknesses overlap. So step six says we are, or we were, entirely ready to have God remove all these character defects. We were, we are, and we will be in the future because it's not going to happen overnight, okay? James 4:10 says, "Humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will lift you up." Okay, humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will lift you up. We can't go to Him saying, "Hey, nobody learns anything if you know everything." Okay, nobody's going to, once you graduate high school, you think you've already learned everything you're going to learn. Once you get that doctorate degree and you think you know it all, you can learn something from everybody and everything. If you've got to the point in life where you think you know everything, then you're actually going to regress. You're going to regress back to kindergarten, so to speak, because there's always something to learn and there's always opportunities to grow. So we humble ourselves before the Lord and He will lift us up. We humble, say, "God, hey, I know that you know everything, okay? You created the universe, you created me, you created that woman over there, and I know she's complicated. She's the most complicated thing I've ever seen in my life, right? So, you created all of us, and you certainly know more than me, and I humble myself before you and ask you for your help and your guidance, okay?" So anyway, I think that, I'm going to bring up that dream that I had that time that was so very realistic about the train that I was on. And I don't know if you were in the beginning when I talked about it, but I think it's an important time to talk about it now, and there's some points that I want to make sure that you get out of this thing. And of course the wind's trying to blow my page here. But basically I had a very realistic dream probably about 20 5 years ago, okay? And I was a workaholic back then, was working, and there were reasons that were pushing me to work, but I was working a lot of hours, and and I was always, I would never stop, never slowed down, couldn't hardly even sit down to eat out of the car. I mean, just constantly running, 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 running. Whether I was at work or constantly doing things outside of work, you know, I was running a lot, and so I had this dream where I was driving a train, and I was driving a train through this beautiful countryside. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was the most realistic, one of the most realistic dreams I've ever had. And there was these, it was almost like out in California, uh, where these gently rolling long hills and the countryside and wildflowers and everything was just absolutely beautiful. Bright, you know, blue sky, not a cloud in it. And I'm the only one on that train. That train represented my life. Okay, that was what that was. And then the way places I was going was representing the world that I was passing through. The All of a sudden I heard someone like saying, "Hey," and they were waving, and I looked out the right side of my train, and there was just literally there was hundreds and maybe even thousands of people all stacked out there, and they were all smiling. It was a very joyful type of thing, and they were all like egging me on and encouraging and everything. And I remember looking down the side of my train there, and I remember seeing just beautiful new paint. It was just gorgeous. It looked like a brand new train. It was a beautiful train. And, but before that happened, I was adding a lot of cars onto the train. There was just cars. I couldn't even see the end of my train, right? And then all of a sudden, I heard some booing, and some angry voices, and I looked out the left side of my train, and there was just the same number of people on that side, but instead of having smiles and laughing, they were just angry, and they were booing me, and they were just looking at me with disgust. And I looked down the side of my train, and it was just rust, and it was graffiti all over. Not even pretty graffiti. It was just ugly, mangly, faded old graffiti with rust bleeding through it. And and then all those cars on the back of my train was just weighting me down. And there was a light on the front of my train that I had not mentioned yet to you. And that light initially had been shining bright, but it was getting dimmer and dimmer and dimmer, and it was starting to flicker. And so what did me in, man, was hey, the light was still doing okay when all these people were shouting and smiling and praising and so forth. But when all the booing started, man, that light was flickering bad, and all of a sudden it's like the train or the light was a part of me, right? Because it represented me. That whole train represented me as far as my life, okay? And that light was a part of my light that was going out. And I was in trouble, and I felt that in my body. I mean, I felt it. That light, as it was flickering, my spirit, my energy was flicking, right? I mean, it's like I felt exhausted, like totally exhausted. And I dropped down on my knees right then, and at least, praise God, I was smart enough to pray to God for help. And I said, got down on my knees, and I said, "God, please help me. I need some help," you know. And without even opening my eyes, I felt a presence there to my right. I could even tell he was standing on the right side of me, even in my dream. With my eyes closed in my dream, I felt that there was a presence standing next to me in my dream. And of course, I didn't realize it was a dream. So I opened my eyes, looked over to my right, and there was this guy there that looked like Jesus. And he was different than some of the pictures. He was tanned. He was well tanned. I mean, he had dark brown, loose curly hair that wasn't all that long stuff going all the way down to, the middle of his back. But it was still long. Now it was definitely below the collar, and it was real thick and wavy and curly, and it may have even had some little streaks of black in it. It was so dark and brown, but it was definitely loose curls. And anyway. He was not very tall. I think I was maybe even taller than he was, and without even talking to me or without physically talking to me. It's like he had this mental connection with me where he could speak into my head without even verbally speaking. And he said, you got to cut all the cars loose. You got to let the cars loose. You got to let them loose. And I said, I asked him, before that was part of the thing, was I need some help. What do I do? Okay. And then he said, you got to let the cars loose. And so I took that to mean for me to walk back there and cut them loose and to undo the hitch and let them go. And I'm going down the tracks, and there's a cave up ahead, like a tunnel, that's at the end of the tracks. And there's something in my mind that tells me that, that's the end of the tracks right there, basically. If I don't have my light on by the time I go through that dark tunnel, I'm talking, in other words, there's dark times, very dark times ahead, okay? That's the analogy there. If I don't have my light back on by the time I get through that tunnel, I'm not going to make it. And so that's the whole point. So anyway, he said, you got to release the cars. And so I walked back there, and he followed me back there. And I, went into the little connector that's between the engine compartment, which is where I was, where the light is on the front of the train. And then all the cars back there, I couldn't even see the end of them. They were so far back. I reached down and put my hand on the hitch, and I was trying to undo it, and I couldn't undo it. And for a split second, I said, well, I asked him what to do, and he told me what to do, and I'm trying to do it, but I can't do it. And he was patiently standing over here to my left, okay, on the back of that engine car, and I looked up to him, and he's like, well, And that's when it came to me. I said, well, please help me do this. Please help me do this. And that's all he wanted to hear, okay? That's all he wanted to hear. In other words, I was still arrogant. I was going to do it by myself. Even though he walked back there with me, he was still waiting on me to ask him that simple question, please, I need your help with this. I can't do this by myself. So that little bit of pride or energy that I thought I had was not working for me, okay? So just because you ask him what to do doesn't mean that you don't need to continually ask him throughout the process. So when I asked him to help me unleash him, I admitted to him that I couldn't do it by myself, he reached down and put his hand on top of mine, and we undid that thing together. And as soon as those cars was loose, I felt this surge of energy inside of me. I was just on top of the world. And suddenly the light on the front of my engine just got bright as it had ever been. And so for 20 years, I didn't understand the significance of me asking him a second time, about I can't do this on my own. I didn't really understand that too much. I didn't understand how profound that was. That's incredibly profound, okay? You need to really think about that for a minute, because, I'm not the smartest guy in the world. It took me a long time to really understand that as far as how that applies to life in general, okay? Because, I talked about the dream and told a lot of people about the dream, but I never really caught the significance of how important that was to say, God, I'm here, I'm trying to do this by myself, it's not working out. You told me to do this, but actually I need you to help. You told me what to do, but I still continually need your help, and he will. So, I want to bring up 4 points about that dream, okay? Remember when we were talking about the inventory, and remember when we were talking about how important it is to keep a balance, okay? Remember the beautiful new paint going down to one side of my train and all the laughter and smiles from people? And then you remember it was the polar opposite on the left side of my train. It was just ugly, faded, rusted out graffiti and rust all over the side of the train, and all the angry people and the worst and the nastiest things you would see in people as far as judgment and this kind of thing. Remember that balance. In my dream, it was complete balance on the right side of my train and the left side of my train, and I'm right in the middle of the two, okay? So I wanted to bring that point out. Point number 2 was there was too much baggage. Life is going to drag you down if you got too much baggage. I mean, all that stuff in your past is holding you back. Some of the things, it's like in my dream, I was asking for some of those cars to be added, and then I noticed when I stopped at some of the train stations, people would add cars to my train and not even ask me permission first, and I would accept them. And that comes from being too agreeable and letting people run over you sometimes, okay? Um, Sometimes it comes from other people hurting us, and the baggage that they've added on us, we're having to carry that as well. All right, so the next thing, the next fourth point was I asked Jesus what to do. Initially, when I got on my knees, I prayed for help, and he was there, and then I asked him what to do, and he told me, okay? But the fourth point was, which is just as important, okay, is that even though I did what he told me to do, I did it on my own, you know, without him. Even though he walked alongside me, I had this attitude that I was going to do this by myself. And when I got that, I realized that doing this by myself wasn't working. And that's when I looked up to him and said, hey, I need your help, okay? And please help me, please. I didn't just say, hey, I need your help. I said it nicely. I said, please help me. I can't do this by myself. That's how I remember saying it in my dream. So anyway, tonight's acrostic is ready. And when I say acrostic, we're going to take the first letter of ready and we're going to break it into some subjects. R is for release control, E is for easy does it, A is for accept the change, D is for replace your character defects, and Y is for yield to the growth. Okay? Number one, release control. Release control. Remember we had a lesson way back on about talking about control and how controlling, trying to control a lot of things in our life is probably messing us up. And so Psalm 143:10 says, help me to do your will, for you are my God. Lead me in your paths, for your spirit is good. We can't do our will and do God's will at the same time unless God's will is our will. So you got to understand the difference. And when God's will first comes into our life, we may not recognize it. If we know God, really well, then we might recognize it. But if we're not and we're praying hard for His will to come into our life, then we may not actually recognize it because our will is kind of like being ripped apart, okay? It's being ripped from us. And man, if you're especially hard-headed and strong-willed, to have your will ripped away from you is let's just say it's not an easy, pleasant experience at first, okay? So it's kind of like you're going through withdrawals in some ways, okay? So the next one is easy does it, okay? Easy does it, Let it flow. Relax a little bit. Accept it, relax a little bit, and just let things flow, okay? Don't ask God's will into your life, and just ease into it, and let him do his work, okay? And we have our work to do, but we have to trust that he has his work to do too, and we have to trust that if he grafted us onto his vine, the living vine, that if we do our part, then we will grow into who we're supposed to be and produce fruit. Accept the change. Accepting changes in our life. If we've been doing the same thing, hanging around the same people, having the same bad habits and same incredibly terrible, destructive patterns in our life, it's going to be a little bit of a change. And we've got to recognize that, and we have to know that, okay, and so to speak. And we have to accept it, And sometimes people get used to a certain thing, and new things are kind of scary, and hey, I understand that, but we have to accept it, but we also have to trust that in the long run it's going to be better for us. And it is. 1 Peter 1:13 through 14 says, so then, have your minds ready for action. We've already talked about some action there. Okay? Keep alert and set your hope completely on the blessing which will be given to you when Christ Jesus is revealed. to be obedient to God and to not allow our lives to be shaped by those desires that had you when you were still ignorant. Everybody's had strong desires. I mean, some people probably stronger desires than others. Some people just don't have a whole lot of desire, but they don't have desire for anything, pretty much. But if you're exceptionally strong-willed and you're exceptionally have some strong desires in different areas of your life, then you know what I'm talking about here, because you're basically being molded into something different, okay? And that this verse says you don't need to be shaped by those desires of when you were ignorant. And some of these things, man, they hurt you and they hold you back in life, okay? I'm not gonna say anything different than that. James 4:10 says, "Humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will lift you up." So we have to get rid of a part of ourselves, so to speak, to be able to receive God's mercy and God's will and God's grace in our life. We have to remove part of ourselves in order to do that. I mean, and it's removing part of ourselves can be a painful process. I mean, for a little while, okay. But in the long run, trust me, it's going to be much better. The next thing, D, do replace the character defects. All right, now we've talked about this verse before. Matthew 12:43 through 44 says, "When an evil spirit goes out of a person, it travels over dry country looking for a place to rest." Get that now. When I yank this evil spirit and I get him out of me, okay, or the 7 evil spirits, or how many evil spirits it is, I get him out of here and I send him on his way, And the time that I was spending with him doing the things he was wanting me to do, I'm not doing. That time is absent. It is not doing those things anymore. So I got these extra 2 hours every day that I don't know what to do with, okay? So anyway, the verse says that demon goes out and he travels all over the place, And then he gets to thinking to himself, he said, that was my house back there, and there's still a vacancy at the end, so to speak. So I'm just going to go get some of my buddies, and we're going to go back, and we're going to go right back where we were before, because there's a void spot there, and there's an empty room, a vacant room, and we're going to go in there, and we're going to do 10 times the damage or whatever that we ever did before, okay? So he goes back, and he does it, and he's worse this time. They all came and lived there. Now, this goes back to when we talked about trading a good habit for a bad habit, okay? You got rid of a bad habit. Say you were sitting in front of the TV, watching TV, drinking a case of beer every night, smoking pot, going to the casino. So now you got 2 hours of time that you're going to be like fidgeting. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? You know what you're going to do? You're going to get something else to do that's more positive. Maybe you want to go back to school. Maybe you want to take a night class. Maybe you want to work some extra hours. Maybe you want to take your family, especially if you've been neglecting your family now, you want to take them to a park, and you want to make a habit of doing that. You want to turn the TV off, cancel your subscription to Netflix or whatever it is that you've been watching. Throw out the video games. It's taking all your excess time where you can't spend time with your family. They're running amok or whatever. And you're going to change some things. You're going to swap bad habit for some good habits, okay? And it may take more than one good habit. You've got to change. It's basically changing your lifestyle. This verse is so profound. I didn't understand it for many years. This verse is amazing. It's philosophers should be talking about this verse because it's so true. You get rid of something, you better have something to replace it, okay? You better have something to replace it. All right, the next one, Y in ready. Yield to the growth. 1 John 3:9 says, "The person who has been born into God's family does not make a practice of sinning because now God's life is in him, so he can't keep on sinning, for this new life has been born into him and controls him. He's been born again." Now, we're going to never be perfect, okay? That's not what it's saying. If you read it in context, if you read the New Testament in context, particularly Romans, we're naturally inclined to do certain things, but the process is to slowly quit doing those things, and we'll never, ever, 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 ever be perfect on this earth when we're alive and when we're breathing. Okay, we're never going to be perfect people, but we can certainly be better people. Okay, and so, you know, we don't want to do destructive things as a habit and a pattern, and we don't want to bring our friends into those same destructive habits and things either. And what kind of friend would you be to do that? I mean, you hate that person. In other words, you hate that person if you bring them into a destructive lifestyle. You don't love them. You don't care them. You're just in some kind of addiction or having fun, and and you're bringing them along to the party too. And it's hurting them as well. And maybe they can't even handle it as much as you can. Maybe you can at least keep a job, but they get into the same thing you're getting into, and they can't handle it. Okay, so anyway, swapping out, replacing these character defects, yielding to the growth. Yielding to the growth means, reflect, try to do something better with your life. Look, I'm going to talk about this withdrawal process a little bit because it's important. What I said about swapping good habits for bad habits. Particularly if your flesh or your DNA or whatever you want to call it, that you inherited from your ancestors, and then it's been conditioned to do certain things, and you've been doing the same certain habits for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, there's going to be a little bit of a process of withdrawal, okay? There's going to be a little bit of some changes before you get on this better path. So the key is be around people, get in church, go to a lot of social functions if you can. Read if you're an introvert. Just read. If you're sitting in that recliner and it triggers you to go get beer, throw that recliner out the door and get you a rocking chair and do something different. Just you may have to make some changes in your life. Keep it in focus. There might be some withdrawals. Add that to your success plan. Write it down, pin it on the wall if you have to, and do it. Swap the habits. I'm talking about swapping habits. Recognize that, write that down, pin it on the wall that you're going to have to swap those habits. That's incredibly important, okay? Incredibly important to kick something out and then bring something else in its place that's more positive and productive, and that's going to ultimately replace that void place. In other words, that way when those demons come back, your vacancy, there's no vacancies there. There's no room at the end, so to speak, okay? So anyway, fill yourself up with God, Spirit, but also find some other things to do with your time, okay? That's important. Things that you enjoy, make a list and go experiment, do different things that bring you joy, but that are not going to hurt you. And so when you truly ask God's will into your life, and His will begins to merge with your will, and even when His will begins to replace your will, particularly for us hard-headed people, it is a little bit of a process, and it's almost like a part of you is being ripped away, and something else is replacing it. And that's a big deal. That's how you can tell, okay, when God's will is coming into your life. And accept it. Pray for more of it. Pray for guidance every day. The ultimate individual who knows everything is God. Pray for wisdom. Pray for guidance. Pray for Him to be in your life in every decision that you make. You know, I always say, if I'd have asked God about the most important decisions of my life instead of just doing it on my own, then there wouldn't have been near about so many mistakes, okay? So, all important decisions include God in those decisions. And, you know, and we don't want to do that when we're hard-headed. I mean, we don't. We want to do what we want to do. I mean, that's just all it is to it. I mean, so, but, you know, sometimes when we do what we want to do, it isn't the right thing to do, and it ends up hurting us later. So, be ready. Keep your eyes and mind on Jesus. Swap those bad habits for good habits. In other words, swap time for time. Swap the bad time for good time. You know, something better. And most importantly, when you succeed, never forget the hell that you went through. You know, where you were at years ago. You know, when you grow into who you're supposed to be growing into, when you grow out of being a baby and you become an adult and you learn how to fly, so to speak, you know, you learn how to run, you learn how to walk, you learn how to talk, you learn how to run, you learn how to fly. You know, when God gives you the only source of power, the only true source, which comes from Him, right, not from ourselves, you know, never forget the hell that you came from. Keep a journal so that you can look back at it every now and then and say, man, I can't believe I was there. Don't forget it, because it'll help you never want to go back, okay? It'll help you never want to relapse and go back there. And that's incredibly important, you know. You know, releasing the cars on the train isn't the same as forgetting that those cars were there. I mean, because you don't want to take them back, okay? So, anyway, that's important. Pray weekly. Pray daily. Pray hourly. You know, pray every minute if you have to during certain times of the day. You know, pray for all decisions. Pray for God's help. Pray to ask Him what to do, and then pray to ask you and ask Him to help you through the process, because you admit you can't do it on your own. And with that, I'm going to say good night, and I hope you have a good one, and I will see you next time.